Ancient philosophers called it one-pointed mind. Neuroscientists label it flow state. But most people will live their entire lives without ever experiencing true focus. Not because they can't, but because they're looking for it in entirely the wrong place. Today, we're going to explore a profound paradox that sits at the heart of human consciousness. Why the very mechanism designed to help us survive in the wild now prevents us from thriving in the modern world. This isn't just another productivity hack or focus technique. We're diving deep into the philosophical and neurological foundations of attention itself. Consider this. Every great breakthrough in human history, from Einstein's theory of relativity to Beethoven's symphonies, emerged from states of profound focus. Yet our educational systems, workplaces, and even our personal development approaches seem designed to scatter our attention across 1,000 different directions. Why is this happening, and more importantly, what can we do about it? The answer lies in understanding three fundamental philosophical principles that govern human attention: the principle of conscious selectivity, the paradox of effortless effort, and what I call the attention economy of the soul. When you grasp these concepts, not just intellectually but experientially, everything changes. Let me share what I mean through the lens of someone I'll call Marcus, a software developer who discovered these principles entirely by accident. Marcus spent years trying every focus technique imaginable: the Pomodoro method, meditation apps, nootropics, elaborate morning routines. Nothing worked consistently until the day he stopped trying to focus and started understanding what focus actually is. The first principle we need to understand is what philosophers call conscious selectivity. Your consciousness is not a spotlight that illuminates everything equally. It's more like a master curator in an infinite museum, constantly choosing which exhibits deserve attention while allowing thousands of others to fade into the background. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think focus means forcing their attention onto something. But true focus is actually the art of conscious exclusion. When Marcus finally understood this, he realized he'd been approaching focus backwards his entire life. Instead of trying to concentrate harder on his coding projects, he began practicing the art of systematically excluding irrelevant stimuli from his awareness. Think about it philosophically for a moment. What is attention, really? It's the mechanism by which consciousness interfaces with reality. But reality presents us with infinite possibilities in every moment. The chair you're sitting on, the temperature of the room, the conversation happening outside, the memory of what you had for breakfast, the anticipation of tonight's dinner, the political news you read this morning. All of these compete for your conscious attention simultaneously. The untrained mind tries to process everything. The focused mind learns to choose consciously. This isn't suppression or denial. It's the development of what I call attentional sovereignty. You become the conscious director of your own awareness rather than its passive victim. But here's where the philosophy gets really interesting. Ancient Stoic philosophers understood something that modern neuroscience is only beginning to confirm. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your reality. Marcus discovered this when he started applying conscious selectivity to his daily work. Instead of battling distractions, he began to see distraction as information about his own unconscious patterns. Every time his mind wandered, instead of judging it, he would ask, "What is this distraction telling me about what I think I need right now?" Sometimes it was telling him he needed a break. Sometimes it revealed underlying anxiety about a deadline. Sometimes it showed him that the task itself wasn't aligned with his deeper values and priorities. This brings us to the second philosophical principle: the paradox of effortless effort. True focus doesn't feel like work, it feels like coming home to yourself. When Marcus finally experienced this state, he described it as disappearing into the work while simultaneously becoming more myself than ever. Modern neuroscience reveals something profound about focused states. When your brain enters what researchers call transient hypofrontality, the prefrontal cortex, your inner critic and self-monitoring system, actually down-regulates its activity. This isn't laziness or spacing out. It's your brain's way of removing the internal friction that normally prevents deep absorption in a task. Dr. Arne Dietrich, who first identified this phenomenon, explains it like this. Your brain literally turns down the volume on self-consciousness so you can merge more completely with whatever you're doing. But here's the philosophical implications. This suggests that our ordinary state of divided attention isn't natural, it's conditioned. We've been trained by our culture, education, and technology to maintain constant self-monitoring. We're always evaluating our performance, comparing ourselves to others, planning the next thing, reviewing the last thing. No wonder we can't focus. We're trying to swim while simultaneously analyzing our swimming technique. Marcus learned to recognize the difference between productive self-awareness and destructive self-monitoring. Productive self-awareness allows you to make course corrections without losing flow. Destructive self-monitoring creates a kind of internal noise that drowns out everything else. This brings us to the third and perhaps most important principle, the attention economy of the soul. Your attention is not unlimited. It's actually the most precious resource you possess, more valuable than time, money, or even physical energy. Yet most people spend it as carelessly as they might spend pocket change. Consider this philosophical question. If you could track every moment of attention you gave to different activities, thoughts, and concerns over the course of a week, what would that tell you about what you actually value? Not what you say you value, but what you demonstrate through the allocation of your consciousness. Marcus began treating his attention like a finite currency. He started each day by consciously deciding where he would spend his attention, rather than letting external circumstances and internal impulses make those decisions for him. This wasn't about rigid scheduling, it was about conscious intention. The ancient Greeks had a concept called prosage, which roughly translates to continuous attention to the present moment. But it's more nuanced than our modern understanding of mindfulness. Prosage is the practice of maintaining philosophical awareness throughout daily activities. It's remembering that how you attend to this moment shapes not just what you accomplish, but who you become. When you truly understand this, focus stops being about productivity and starts being about integrity. It becomes a way of honoring your deepest values through the quality of your presence. Marcus discovered that his chronic distraction wasn't just hurting his work. It was preventing him from becoming the person he wanted to be. So why do most people never experience this level of focus? The answer lies in 4 philosophical misconceptions that our culture perpetuates. First, we've been taught to see focus as a form of restriction rather than freedom. We think that paying attention to one thing means missing out on everything else. But the opposite is true. When you focus deeply on something, you don't miss the rest of reality. You experience a more complete, more vivid version of it. The person who can lose themselves in a conversation with their child experiences more life in those moments than someone who's simultaneously checking their phone, thinking about work, and planning dinner. Second, we confuse stimulation with engagement. Our culture has addicted us to constant novelty, but novelty is the enemy of depth. Real engagement, the kind that leads to mastery, fulfillment, and what we might call spiritual satisfaction, requires sustained attention to something long enough for it to reveal its deeper layers. Think about any skill you've truly mastered, any relationship that's deeply meaningful to you, any subject that captivates you completely. None of these revealed their treasures quickly. They required what the philosopher Gaston Bachelard called patient attention, the willingness to stay with something long enough for it to transform both itself and you. Third, we've been conditioned to see our minds as machines that should operate consistently rather than as natural systems that have rhythms, seasons, and optimal conditions. Marcus learned to work with his mental ecology rather than against it. He discovered that his brain had natural cycles of high focus and necessary rest, and that fighting these cycles was like trying to make a river flow uphill. The fourth misconception is perhaps the most damaging. We've been taught to see deep focus as a luxury rather than a necessity. But from a philosophical perspective, the ability to direct your attention consciously is the foundation of free will itself. If you can't choose where your mind goes, in what sense are you free? Let me give you the first practical application of these principles. I call it attention archaeology. For the next 3 days, become an observer of your own attention patterns. Not to judge them, but to understand them. Every hour, take 30 seconds to ask yourself, where has my attention been for the last hour? What pulled it away from where I intended it to go? What patterns am I noticing? You're not trying to change anything yet, you're just gathering data about your own consciousness. Marcus discovered that his attention was being hijacked by very specific triggers. Certain types of notifications, particular emotional states, even specific times of day when his mental energy was naturally lower. Once he could see these patterns clearly, he could work with them rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. The second practice involves training what I call conscious exclusion. This isn't about fighting distractions. It's about developing the capacity to choose what enters your awareness. Start with something simple. When you're having a conversation, practice letting everything except the person's voice and your own internal responses fade into the background. When you're reading, let everything except the meaning of the words become peripheral. This isn't forced concentration. It's more like adjusting the aperture on a camera. You're not eliminating the background. You're consciously choosing what to keep in focus and what to allow to blur. With practice, this becomes as natural as breathing. The third practice is what I call values-based attention allocation. Here's where the philosophy becomes intensely practical. At the beginning of each week, identify 3 things that truly matter to you. Not what you think should matter, but what actually aligns with your deepest values. Then track how much of your attention these 3 things actually receive versus how much attention goes to things that don't matter to you. This practice reveals something profound. Most of us are living in a kind of attentional poverty. We're rich in consciousness but poor in conscious choice. We have this incredible capacity for awareness, but we're spending it on mental junk food rather than the experiences and activities that could truly nourish us. Marcus found that when he aligned his attention with his values, focus became effortless. He wasn't fighting his own mind anymore, he was collaborating with it. His deeper self and his conscious intentions were finally working in the same direction. The fourth practice is what I call deep time immersion. Once a day, choose one activity and commit to staying with it for at least 90 minutes without switching tasks. This could be work, creative pursuits, physical exercise, or even conversation. The key is developing the capacity to move past the initial mental resistance and into what neuroscientists call the flow channel. Most people never experience their true attentional capacity because they switch tasks every few minutes. It's like trying to understand the depth of a lake by only ever wading in the shallows. Deep time immersion teaches you what your consciousness is capable of when you give it the space and time to fully engage. What we're really talking about here is consciousness itself. Your ability to focus deeply isn't just a practical skill. It's an expression of your freedom as a conscious being. In a world that profits from your distraction, choosing where to place your attention becomes a radical act of self-determination. The ancient philosopher Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by our judgments about things. But I want to take this further. We are not disturbed by external circumstances, but by our unconscious relationship with our own attention. When you develop conscious mastery over your attention, you develop mastery over your experience of reality itself. Marcus discovered something profound through this journey. Superhuman focus isn't about becoming a more efficient machine. It's about becoming more fully human. When you can direct your consciousness with intention and sustain it with ease, you access states of being that are simply not available to the constantly distracted mind. This brings us to a question that goes far beyond productivity or performance. What becomes possible in your life when you can truly choose what your consciousness engages with? What relationships become available to you? What creative possibilities emerge? What depth of experience opens up? The science of superhuman focus reveals that we are far more capable than we realize. The philosophy of conscious attention shows us that this capacity is not just about doing better work. It's about living a more awakened life. Most people never tap into superhuman focus because they never question their fundamental assumptions about attention itself. They treat their mind like a wild horse that needs to be broken rather than a natural partner that can be trained. They fight their consciousness rather than understanding it. But when you approach focus as a philosophical practice rather than a productivity hack, everything changes. You're not just improving your performance. You're developing your capacity for presence, depth, and conscious choice. You're becoming the kind of person who can sustain attention on what truly matters, even in a world designed to scatter your consciousness across 1,000 meaningless fragments. The path to superhuman focus isn't about forcing your mind into submission. It's about understanding your consciousness so deeply that directing it becomes as natural as breathing. And when that happens, you discover something remarkable. The focused mind isn't just more productive, it's more alive, more creative, and more free than you ever imagined possible. The question isn't whether you're capable of superhuman focus. The question is whether you're willing to understand your own consciousness well enough to access what was always there, waiting for you to remember how to use it. If you found these insights valuable and want to explore more practices for developing conscious attention and inner calm, consider subscribing to the channel. Each week, we dive deep into the philosophical and practical foundations of a more awakened way of living. Your consciousness is your most precious resource. Let's learn to use it consciously together.